Hi, my name is Jennifer J. Raffler, and I am your host for the Sol2Soul Global Summit 2. Learn the truth about our sun, how it heals us, supports our spiritual evolution, and more. Today we have a very special guest, Jamie Janover. Jamie Janover has long been interested in the intersection of science and all things considered spiritual. So when he first came across Nassim Haramein lecturing at a music festival in 2002, the dots connected. Ever since that time, Jamie has been delving ever deeper into the world of unified physics and ancient cultures through the lens of Nassim Haramein's theories. In his extensive world travels on tour as a professional musician, Jamie has explored ancient sites around the world, photographing and researching their mysterious origins. Jamie was taught by Nassim Haramein how to deliver presentations on his unified field theory in 2008 as one of the Resonance Science Foundation's original emissaries. In 2012, he became the Resonance Project's first ambassador and took over for Nassim in teaching 3-day delegate programs, an in-person course that became the delegate program online course in the Resonance Academy. Jamie has delivered hundreds of comprehensive presentations on Nassim's work at events, conferences, and festivals worldwide in places as far-reaching as New Zealand, Egypt, India, Canada, Indonesia, Spain, Costa Rica, Australia, Portugal, Italy, Romania, Czech Republic, the Netherlands, England, Mexico, and all across the USA from New York to Hawaii. Please join me in giving Jamie a super warm welcome. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
How are you doing today?
It's good.
Awesome. Wow, I know that we want to talk about ancient civilizations and the unified field theory. Where should we start? I mean, we were speaking a little bit before we started recording about how the sun can heal us. Is that a good place for us to start?
I mean, sure, we can just dive right into the sun. Like a lot of things, we were told things when we were kids about the sun that turned out to be incorrect. And there's certain things that I think that astrophysicists and cosmologists think about the sun that may turn out to be incorrect. Nassim Haramein has a theory about how the universe works and how it's structured. And it's a long story that I won't be able to explain on this call. That's what I do when I do these long presentations. But the bottom line is that space-time and the universe is perhaps different than what we were taught in school. So for example, about the sun. Do you remember when we were told that the sun is this burning ball of gas and it's kind of like a thermonuclear reaction and it's burning hydrogen and it's eventually going to burn out?
Yes.
That is maybe not the most accurate description of the sun. According to Nassim Haramein's theory, the sun and all other stars in the entire universe are actually black holes. Okay. This is not what we were taught in school. This is not, if you went to a traditional physicist and said, is the sun a black hole? They would say, no, it's a star. A black hole is this black thing that you can't see, and it's like a giant vacuum cleaner that has such a strong gravitational field that it sucks everything in, including the electromagnetic spectrum, which means light gets sucked into a black hole. That's why they're called black, this technical term. Well, Nassim is saying basically that a black hole is not just some giant vacuum cleaner in the sky. He renames black holes black/white holes, spelled W-H-O-L-E, because they don't just suck in information. Information comes out of them as well. Okay. This is something we were also told as kids, right? That black holes just suck things in. And then maybe a few decades ago, this guy, Stephen Hawking, that I'm sure you've heard of, said, wait a minute, actually, there's these particles that have polar opposites. It's matter and antimatter, and it's kind of like these virtual particles are flashing in and out of existence in the vacuum. And theoretically, a pair of particles could go right to the event horizon of a black hole, which is the threshold beyond which, if you fall in there, you have no choice but to get sucked in.
Okay.
And maybe that pair could get broken and one falls in and one goes out.
Okay.
And that was confirmed to be correct. It's called now Hawking radiation. So we already know for a fact, even mainstream physics says that black holes radiate. And Stephen Hawking argued that they radiate very slowly and that eventually all the black holes will evaporate and disappear. Now, that's Hawking's theory. Nassim is saying that a black hole is actually ejecting a lot more than just Hawking radiation. There's huge jets that come out, and we see this in the form of pulsars and quasars. But the sun, essentially, he's saying, is a black hole, but it's surrounded by plasma. The event horizon of the sun is maybe only 18 kilometers across. It's a black hole with a diameter of about 18 kilometers, or maybe the seed, very inner core of it, is very small compared to that. But the rest of it is radiating all this plasma, which gives light and heat and sound and X-rays and gamma rays and cosmic rays. So essentially, I'm saying that the black hole of the sun is our local singularity. It's the source of all of the energy in our solar system. It gave birth to all the planets. Nassim's theory would then say that it's scalar black holes, that the sun is a black hole orbiting a much larger black hole called the supermassive black hole in the center of the galaxy. And shearing off the event horizon of that supermassive black hole comes smaller black holes called stars. And inside the stars, they're making smaller black holes.
Okay.
I.e., all the atoms that are in the solar system were made inside of a star. We know for a fact that we literally are stardust. Thank you, Joni Mitchell, right? That all the atoms and all the periodic table of elements is formed inside of stars. And so Nassim Haramein actually has a physics paper called the Schwarzschild proton that describes atoms as black holes. So even the atoms that you're made of are described as black holes in Nassim's theory, specifically protons. The proton is the most stable, longest lasting particle that there is in the entire universe. We've never seen a proton slow down. We've never seen an atom stop spinning. We've never even seen an atom slow its rate of oscillation. It's a lot of energy. Where is that energy coming from? How are all the atoms in the universe continuously vibrating? They never stop. They never slow down. It's basically black hole coming out of black hole, coming out of black hole, scalar dimensions of singularity or scalar dimensions of black hole. This is a very different kind of theory, but Nassim has the math to back this up. And if that's correct, let's just assume it's correct, that means that you are made of approximately 100 trillion cells. Each one of your cells is made of approximately 100 trillion atoms. Each one of those atoms has a different number of protons rotating around each other in the nuclei of the atom at the speed of light. And each of those protons are little miniature black holes, which means you can say to somebody, you are basically made of quintillions of black holes spinning at the speed of light. Amazing. And all you have to do is eat and drink and sleep and dream, and biology does the rest. It's amazing. It's unbelievable, right? The amount of coherency that we're experiencing just by being biological beings, and that I can talk to you and you can hear what I'm saying and say, oh, right, I understand what you're talking about, and there's consciousness. That is an incredible amount of organization that we are exhibiting. And how is that all working? How are we even keeping that coherency? It seems like the universe has to have some sort of feedback loop or information transfer mechanism that's happening so that the universe can keep its organization at all scales. So this is a long-winded story to get to the point of the story, which is that the sun is the mama black hole in our solar system. It's our local singularity. And that you're made of lots of little baby black holes. So you want that communication to happen between you and the sun.
Okay.
In other words, you need to get some sunlight. People that don't get enough sunlight in their life, they get depressed. You can actually measure it, right? There's statistics on this. It's called the suicide rate. In countries above the Arctic Circle that experience 6 months of darkness, suicide rate goes up, depression goes up. So this is just an indicator that, yes, we do need light. And my partner at one point met a ex-CIA agent and said, oh, you used to work for the CIA? Cool. Let me ask you a question. What's the one thing I need to know? I mean, you're CIA. You probably know some cool information that the rest of us might not know. And weirdly enough, the CIA agent's answer was, don't wear sunscreen.
Wow. I'm impressed. Thoroughly impressed.
How about that? And it's because you want mama black hole to talk to your baby black holes. That there's direct information exchange happening between the Earth and the sun and all the biological entities on the Earth with the sun. And it might actually, have something to do with activating your DNA or interacting with the DNA molecule, because we figured out that DNA doesn't work at all unless it's perfectly packed with water molecules. And the water molecule is the direct information transfer from the structure of space-time to the biological structure. In other words, these protons that are black holes are not just entities in themselves. The protons are made up of these little vibrations called the Planck vibration, or the Planck length. I don't know if you've heard of Planck length or the Planck's distance. It's the shortest vibration of the electromagnetic spectrum. Super duper small. And they're actually like little spherical waveforms, because there's no such thing as a flat anything, like a flat waveform on an oscilloscope. That's just us flattening something that's actually 3D. And there's 10 to the 60 of these little vibrations in a proton. That's the quantization of the structure of space-time, the pixelization of our existence, if you will. Like on our screen right now, this image is made up of pixels, little dots. Well, the proton is pixelated by little dots, and a spherical pixel is called a voxel. So it's 10 to the 60 voxels, that's a 1 with 60 zeros after it, inside of a proton. These things are so small you can't even conceive of it. And those little vibrations make protons, which make atoms, which make molecules, which make proteins, which make you. And interestingly enough, the atom itself is 99.999999999% space. So really, we're mostly made of space. And we're mostly made of this primordial oscillating soup that you could call a bunch of different things. They used to call it the plenum. Then they called it the ether. And then they didn't like the ether. It sounded too magical. And so they pulled the ether out of physics. And with it, they made some very big mistakes mathematically. Now the ether's coming back. It's being called the zero-point field, the quantum foam, the source field, God, the vacuum, space, space-time. Call it whatever you want. We're made of and bathing in this nearly infinitely dense superfluid medium that we call space, which is actually full of energy. And so this whole thing is this interconnected network, the connected universe, if you will, where black holes are forming singularities where it's a center of a spiral of a vortex of spin, a dual torus dynamic. Yep. So you have galaxies, and then you have stars, and then you have the Earth and the magnetic field of the Earth being a torus, and it's all spinning. Everything's spin inside of spin inside of spin, nested like Russian dolls to infinity, infinitely smaller and infinitely bigger. And we're part of that. We're actually medium-sized. We're halfway in size between the Planck distance that I just described and the entire universe. So we tell kids, oh, you're this little tiny, insignificant spot on this one rock that's orbiting one of billions of stars in our galaxy, and there's billions of galaxies. And then the kid thinks, oh my God, I'm so small, I'm so insignificant. But really, you're an entire universe to a Planck scale being. You're halfway in size. You're gigantic. And all the information of the large from the cosmological, keeping track of what's going on at the quantum scale, has to pass through our resolution or our dimension. So we are actually conduits of information, a feedback loop mechanism, if you will, for the universe to learn more about itself. And when I say we, I mean biology. I'm talking all biology, not just humans. So maybe all matter is conscious too, because this entire thing has to be able to talk to itself. So maybe it's a living universe. Maybe it's a conscious living universe. And if that's so, then the sun could easily be a conscious entity, and it knows that we're here. Notice that we haven't had a coronal mass ejection point perfectly at the Earth and wipe our atmosphere in seconds. Definitely possible. Super duper possible. Could happen at any time. Maybe the universe is looking out for us. Maybe we have fans. Maybe it could just be chance that we haven't been vaporized by the sun. But I would argue that the sun is actually conscious and that the Earth is conscious, and the whole Gaia hypothesis is right on. And obviously all the animals are conscious, and it's very much now provable that plants are conscious. So where did you draw the line? What is consciousness? The sun actually ties into that because it is the most dynamic, interactive feedback mechanism in our entire solar system. And everything it does affects every atom in the entire solar system. If you have a giant pool and you've got little ripples over here, and then somebody jumps in the pool and makes big waves, the ripples are going to be on the big waves as those waves go by. So you want to be in interaction with the sun. You want to let sun hit your skin. I'm not saying go out and burn yourself and stay out in the sun all day, but you don't necessarily want to slather yourself in sunscreen and stay inside all the time. You want to have at least some sunlight interaction, even if it's 10 minutes a day. And maybe even being conscious of that while you're doing it will have some sort of benefit to your biology. We're still in the early stages, though, of learning how all this works, which is why there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of different people with different stories about how the universe works, but they're starting to converge, because if there's one central thing that is the thing, eventually all descriptions will converge towards that one thing. And that one thing is space itself. That's the one thing that's everywhere, no matter where you go, from the quantum to the cosmological. So I'm sorry, that probably was a very long answer to this initial question, but I was trying to basically do the entire universe in a nutshell in that answer.
Okay.
Because it's all tied together. The sun is not an independent being. It's part of the thing that we call the universe.
Yes. And I was wondering if you could distinguish between space-time and space for our viewers. So when you say that we're made up mostly of space, and I agree with that, what does that have to do with space-time, the term space-time?
It's basically different terminology for the same thing. I mean, Einstein was the one who came along and said, yeah, I know you guys are really good at measuring space. We've figured out how to measure width, depth, and height really accurately. And I know we've measured time really well. We've got Swiss watches that are accurate to it within a nanosecond in 100 years. Good work. But I'm here to tell you that space and time aren't separate. It's one continuous fabric. And everybody goes, what are you talking about, man? I can't even visualize that. What do you mean space-time? But that's basically what it is that space and time aren't separate. And so you can say space, or you can say space-time. Space-time's more accurate. But the common vernacular that everybody knows about is space, of like, oh, I'm over here, and you're over there, and then there's a bunch of space between us, right? People know that, but the fact of the matter is that the space in between us is not what we traditionally think of as space. It's actually a superfluid that's full of energy. It's not empty at all. It's nearly infinitely dense, which is kind of bizarre, right? Like, wait a minute, I'm moving my hand. I don't feel anything. Well, I guess I'm in the atmosphere. And if you move your hand really quickly, you can actually feel the air, right? If a hurricane comes, it could knock over my house. However, what if you're floating in the vacuum of space in between galaxies, right? There's no air, right? It's a vacuum, right? So that if you move your hand, is there anything there? Is there a viscosity or an energy density to the fabric of space? Good question. We didn't know. And Henrik Casimir in 1947 said, let's do an experiment to try to figure out if there's actually energy in space. And we weren't able to do his experiment until 1990 at Seattle University. But eventually we were able to isolate a tiny sliver of the vacuum of space between two plates that were only a micron apart from each other. And we were able to measure a differential of pressure between the plates. In other words, space-time was pushing the plates. And so they got a measurement of the energy density of the fabric of the vacuum, the amount of energy that exists in space, and it turns out to be an incredibly astronomically high number. And that confused the hell out of the physicists, because then they took the number that represents how much energy is in space, put it in their field equations, and it came out to nearly infinity. And so then they said, great, what are we going to do? Go say, oh yeah, we figured out how the universe works. It's just one giant infinite thing. Infinity times infinity is infinity. People would be like, dude, you sound like Lao Tzu or some ascended master or something. I thought we were doing physics. And so what did they do? They rounded that number off. They rounded off infinity and then proceeded about their business. And then they said, oh, cool, now we've got this really accurate field equation. It's called the standard model of physics. And according to the standard model of physics, there should be a certain amount of matter in the universe. So they got on their telescopes and they looked, and then they went, uh-oh, what's wrong? We're missing some of the mass. Really? How much are you missing? 95%.
Yeah.
Don't you think maybe there was a little mistake that was made somewhere along the line, or else you wouldn't be missing 95% of the universe? So what did they do? They didn't go back to the drawing board and try to redo their equations. They said, let's just invent a new type of matter out of thin air. And since we can't see it, we'll call it dark matter. And now give us billions of dollars. We're going to go look for this stuff. We've been looking for dark matter for decades. Decades. Have we found one shred of evidence of dark matter? No. We see an effect where the galaxy isn't rotating at the right speed as it should be according to our theory. And so now we have to say, oh, well, there's probably these clouds of dark matter around the galaxy that have all this mass, and that's what's keeping the galaxy together. Otherwise, the galaxy should be flinging apart. That's why they had to invent dark matter. Nassim Haramein comes along and says, you guys shouldn't have rounded off the energy that exists in space. If you didn't round off that nearly infinite number that represents how much energy is in space, then you don't need dark matter. And then the proton's a black hole, and the sun is a black hole. And there's a black hole in the center of the galaxy, and there's a black hole in the center of the universe, and we're probably one tiny little dot in the center of a giant sea of other universes, and there's multiverses. And then the whole picture changes. And then he comes up with the exact specific geometry that would give rise to the fact that we perceive space to be empty, even though it's full, because the structure of space is absolutely perfectly balanced on all scales. It's an infinite tetrahedral array. And when you put spheres around all those tetrahedrons of those little oscillating spherical pixels that make up the proton, it's a 3D flower of life symbol. And then you're like, oh, ancient cultures around the entire planet knew of the geometry of the fabric of the quantum vacuum, and they encoded it into their symbology and their monuments and their documents. That doesn't seem like a coincidence. No, it's not a coincidence, because the ancient civilizations knew that that is the fundamental pattern, the fundamental organizing principle of the universe. 3D flower of life sphere packing of quantum vacuum fluctuations. And so that gives rise to why they built the pyramids, which are oscillating, resonating cavities that are in resonance with this geometry of the fabric of the vacuum of the universe. And it starts to explain everything from why there's rings around Saturn, to why they built the Great Pyramid, to how we keep biology's quantum coherence in the structure of space. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's a unified field theory, a theory that describes everything at all scales. No longer do you have math for big stuff, thank you Einstein, and math for small stuff, quantum field theory. Those are two sets of math that don't talk to each other right now. And if you unify that math, then you have one geometry that works from the quantum to the cosmological, and it starts to explain everything. And that's what this very powerful unified physics is that Nassim Haramein has been writing.
Okay. Whoa. Thank you.
There you go, unified field theory in 30 minutes.
Yes, and that's way more interesting than the physics that I learned in high school and college. So thank you for that, Jamie.
Well, you can thank Nassim Haramein, because I didn't think of any of that stuff. I am not a physicist. I am not a mathematician. I'm a musician who can understand how to tell a story, and explain stuff in layman's terms. So I'm a layman, I'm not a physicist, and I'm explaining this theory in these terms so that everybody in the universe can understand and relearn or unlearn some of the very confusing, non-resonant information we were given as kids.
Yes.
Like that, for example, we came crawling out of our cave 10 to 12,000 years ago and started making stone tools. And
sure.
now we know that like Homo erectus was distilling Like, really? Before Homo sapien, before Neanderthal, Homo erectus knew how to distill and make alcohol. Like, these people were not just crawling out of their caves and starting to use symbols and language 10,000 years ago. This might have been happening hundreds of thousands of years ago. That's how off all the information we were given about ourselves is. Just from a few decades ago. We know that's all incorrect. Check out the work of Graham Hancock, and you'll go down the rabbit hole with him. He's like the Nassim Haramein of anthropology and archaeology. Because like Nassim, he's saying something very different than the mainstream, and he gets a lot of flack for it. And there's a lot of evidence to back up his work, and it's starting to come out and point in the direction that he's been saying for a long time, just like with Nassim. So I'm a big fan of Graham Hancock and Nassim Haramein.
So I have a question for you. If we are mostly space-time, then essentially we are walking time machines. Are we not?
Yeah, especially because without any memory, you don't really have a sense of time. It's like if the tree falls in the forest, is there anybody to hear it? Does it make a sound? I guess it makes a sound, but you don't really know what that sound is, or that sound doesn't manifest until there's a conscious being there to perceive it. In a similar way, space and time is happening, but you don't have a sense of time unless you have a sense of memory. If you can't remember 1 second, what happened a second ago, you don't have a sense of a span of time at all. So Nassim actually recoined the word space-time to be space memory.
Space memory. Wow, I like that.
See, it resonated with you. You went like this, you like moved, you smiled, your head changed. Like, that's called a feedback loop of information. When I started getting some of this stuff from Nassim, it would go over my head. I'd be like, man, I don't know what this guy's talking about, but I have the biggest goosebumps I've ever gotten. My body is going, Like, you might want to listen to your body when it reacts to information, when it crosses your event horizon. So this information was resonating with me, and so I started looking into it more, and the more I looked into it, the more it made sense, and the more like the other stuff that I was taught, like in physics class in high school, wasn't making as much sense, and it was devoid of anything having to do with spirituality or metaphysics or anything paranormal. And basically anything that's considered spiritual or metaphysical is just the physics we don't understand yet. And when you start to understand this structure of space, then stuff like telepathy and remote viewing starts to make sense, why that would work. And we know remote viewing works. I mean, the CIA ran with that one. Check out that movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats. That's based on a real CIA program where they were having people be able to remote view. Like, be able to tell what's happening far away without physically being there. Bilocate, if you will. That stuff is still super fringe and hard to understand, but once you understand how the fabric of the vacuum works, then you understand that everything's connected, because those protons are not isolated. They're connected by these little micro wormholes. You ever gotten one of those domes that has like electricity in it with a little ball, and you put your hand on the dome and the plasma shoots up to your hand? It's kind of like a proton. Proton has these little quantum wormholes, 10 to the 40 of them, coming off and connecting to 10 to the 40 other wormholes. And they're connecting and disconnecting and connecting and disconnecting, and information is traveling, and it goes through a network all the way through the entire universe like that. So that's how you can get information to travel faster than the speed of light. Because a wormhole is like a shortcut in the curvature of space-time. You know, Einstein talked about space-time curving. Nassim adds in a torque element and says it's curling. But what is actually curling? What's going on there? How is that communicating? It's because it's spinning at an incredibly fast rate, and then there's wormholes. We know that's true, quantum wormholes. That's how entanglement works. You know entanglement, where you have particles that have a spin and you separate them and you can polarize the spin of one, and the polarization of the other happens instantaneously, no matter how far apart they are. Not the amount of time it takes for speed of light to travel between. They're entangled. They're instantly exchanging information. And that's happening through the structure of space itself, through quantum wormholes. And so if you can make a larger wormhole and go through it, you could pop out on the other side of the galaxy. And so that's perhaps how interstellar travel will eventually happen. We will travel faster than the speed of light. It maybe isn't the speed limit of the universe. If you want to travel through the space, you can't go faster than the speed of light. But if you want to travel through a wormhole, you're doing a shortcut through the structure of space. And so maybe you can go faster than the speed of light.
Okay. Do you think the sun is a portal then?
Absolutely.
Multiple portals?
Yeah, if you want to cut to the chase and just go all the way to the galactic family, because that's where this takes you, right? Like, how could we possibly be the only life in the entire universe? I was told that when I was a kid with a straight face. Teachers being like, we're probably the only life in the whole universe because you have to have water to have life. You have to have liquid water. Can't be frozen, can't be evaporated. Yeah, and guess what? Just 3 or 4 hours ago, or maybe it was 6 hours ago, they announced today there's water on the moon. Frozen ice water on the poles of the moon. Go look it up on BBC. It just went up today.
Wow.
We were told there's no water on the moon, there's no water on Mars, there's no water anywhere. Now we know there's liquid ice water on the moon, there's liquid ice water on Mars, that stars are born in clouds of water, that water comes out of the sun, that there's water molecules floating in between galaxies. We can't find anywhere in the entire universe right now where there's no water.
Where there's no water.
Yeah, it's the opposite of what we were told. Not only that, the conservative estimate of how many Earth-like planets there are in our galaxy that are in the Goldilocks zone where liquid water could be on the surface is 40 billion on the conservative side. 40 billion in our one galaxy. And we were told when we were kids there's 100 to 200 billion galaxies. Now they think that there's at least 1 trillion galaxies, if not, multiple trillions of galaxies times 40 billion. It means that there's countless places where life has happened on this in the universe, and it might not look like our kind of life. Maybe there's life that is arsenic based instead of phosphorus based, like the algae they found in Mono Lake that can live in high levels of arsenic. But still, there's probably life everywhere. And so if there's life everywhere, imagine what's your cell phone going to look like in 1,000 years? What's your laptop going to look like? I guarantee you there's no keyboard on your laptop in 1,000 years.
We won't need it.
And so there's probably folks out there that have such advanced technology that we don't even know how to interact with that. We don't even know what that looks like.
Oh, yeah, of course.
In other words, they could be cloaking themselves and be right here on the call or in the room with me or in the room with you or in the sky all over the place. And we can't even see them like the Romulans in Star Trek, literally, because they have a cloaking device, because we don't even understand how that technology would work, right? What if there's a civilization that had iPhones 1 billion years ago, and they've been evolving ever since at an exponential rate of technological evolution like we're seeing on this planet right now? All bets are off. Then, of course, there's extraterrestrials. They're flying all over the place. They're watching us right now. We're like a gigantic galactic reality television show right now.
I agree with that.
We're probably the highest rated show in the galaxy because it's serious drama. We're like really close to destroying ourselves, and everybody's watching, cheering us on.
Yeah.
But Prime Directive style, I don't think they're messing with us. They're like saying, okay, you guys work it out. We're certainly not going to go down there and talk to you until you stop killing each other. Because the first thing that happens if a ship goes into U.S. airspace is F-16s are mobilized. They start chasing the ship, and those guys are like, oh, man, do I have to go down there? It's probably not a very good job in the world of jobs in the galactic family to be somebody who has to go down to Earth. Do I have to go down there? I feel like I have to put on a suit so I can protect myself from their bad vibes.
Yeah. Or they have to be hidden, in some kind of energy that we can't perceive. And
the long story short is, if you want to go to the other side of the galaxy, you don't fly across the galaxy. You have to go through the scalar wormholes, through the scalar singularities of black hole inside a black hole inside a black hole, which is why you see so many ships coming around volcanoes and in and out of Lake Titicaca and in and out of the bottom of the ocean. because they're accessing the singularity in the center of the earth, which accesses the singularity in the center of the sun, which sends you to the center of the galaxy, which sends you to the center of any other star, to the center of any other planet, and then to the surface of that planet. That's how they get from planet to planet.
Okay, so why do we need a ship then? Do we need a ship?
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah, because if you go into space without a ship, you're dead.
Even through a wormhole.
Yeah, you would be torn to shreds. You need some serious technology. You need some technology that knows how to interact with the field to create an isolation of the gravitational field so that when your ship goes really quickly like this, you don't get flung into the side of the ship. You're creating your own gravitational field because the ships are probably driven by little miniature suns. A star in a jar.
A star in a jar.
Or a black hole in a can, or call it whatever you want. In other words, a piece of galactic technology that is acting in resonance and in according with the way that the universe is already working. So if you could make a little star, if you could go to the sun with an ice cream scoop and grab a little bit of sun and make it its own little star, and you could put that into your device, you have an unlimited amount of energy happening because it's just the universe creating a vortex in space-time and creating a singularity.
Okay.
And this technology may have been brought to Earth by, galactic beings thousands of years ago. When I first started doing these talks, people would look at me and think I was absolutely insane. And now I start talking about this and they go, oh yeah, I've seen every episode of the most popular show on History Channel, Ancient Aliens.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff in there that's questionable, but then there's a lot of stuff that's not questionable that we see. Yeah, like the Great Pyramid of Giza. Go stand in front of there, put anybody in front of there that you want, ask them how they built that, and then listen to their answer, and guaranteed it's not possible, whatever their answer is. Oh yeah, the slaves, 100,000 slaves with the vine ropes and the whole thing. It's not happening. So maybe this thing that's called the black stone in the Quran, the black sun in the Sumerian tablets, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord in the Bible are all the same object. A little sun, right? When you look at the Ark of the Covenant, it's just a box, but Moses was told to make that box by God. God was like, Moses, you need to make a box, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to make it. It tells you how many cubits it's supposed to be, right? The unit of measurement in Egypt at that time. Gave the exact measurements of the box. It has to be acacia wood. It has to have gold on the inside and gold on the outside. It has to have 2 golden angels with the wings almost touching but not quite. And then you look at the pictures and there's this very bright glowing ball that floats in between the angels, and you couldn't even get close to it because it was so bright and it was so powerful. You had to wear veils over your eyes so you didn't right? And you wanted to burn incense so you could see the vortex going down to the singularity. And they could pick this thing up and walk with it if you were pure of heart in the eyes of the Lord. If you weren't pure of heart in the eyes of the Lord, you couldn't even get close to the Ark of the Covenant. You would just die. So there's a consciousness aspect to this technology. This technology is not going to work if you just say, oh, cool, thanks, Ark of the Covenant, Lord. I'm going to go kill all these people with this. It doesn't work like that, thankfully. Or else there'd be all these civilizations that develop these very powerful energy devices that are little stars, and then they'd start blowing stuff up all over the place. Do we see planets being blown up? Do we see aliens fighting against each other with lasers and stuff in space? No, because they're not fighting. Because they evolved their technology and their consciousness to the level where they could interact with this type of technology and power their civilization. And so we're going to head from this scarcity consciousness that we're in now to abundance consciousness as soon as we develop these quote-unquote free energy devices. And it's already happening, but OPEC is still around, and the World Bank is still around, and all these giant society structures that are holding things in place where the dollar is based on oil. It's going to be dramatic, let's just say, as this transition happens. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and eventually we'll evolve our society, and we'll learn to get off the surface of our sphere, and then we can go join the club and be
Our galactic family.
Yeah, and not just be stuck to this little sphere. I mean, I feel like we've been quarantined. Like we went to the moon, and then they said, now, kids, you guys are messing up. You're not allowed to go back to the moon. Notice we haven't gone back to the moon.
Do you believe that we actually went to the moon?
I'm not 100% sure about that. I wouldn't be surprised if we went to the moon and then we were told we weren't allowed to go to the moon anymore. Like, we know how to get to the moon. We can send stuff. We just, bombed the moon not long ago to like send a cloud of dust into the air so we could fly a probe through it and see if there was water in there. That's fully illegal, by the way. NASA was not allowed to bomb the moon, but they did it anyway. Look that up. That was only a few years ago. But
oh, wow.
I know this is all very kind of dramatic, and there's a lot of people on the planet at this time that if they listen to this video, they're going to just roll their eyes. We're still kind of in the early days. We're in like what I like to call the dawn ages, right? Like the dark ages.
The dark ages, yeah.
It wasn't very long ago. It wasn't long ago that we were like, uh-oh, it's not raining. Grab a virgin, bring her to the top of the mountain and rip her heart out.
Oh, boy. No.
We did that not long ago. The Aztecs were doing that all the time. That's not very long ago. Now we're like, oh, we probably don't have to rip out the hearts of virgins to make it rain. Okay, it's because we understand physics a little bit better. And so now we're starting to really evolve, and we're letting people have a little bit more freedom than they used to have, thankfully. And then hopefully eventually we're going to really get over ourselves and stop doing stuff like discrimination and racism, which is kind of ridiculous because, if the universe is an infinite fractal structure, which it certainly seems like it is, then out of all those multiverses, your heart is the center of one of those universes. So like, wow. You are the center of the universe. But don't forget, so is everybody else. Because if you go to a party with the vibe of like, hey, I'm the center, people are like, who the hell does this guy think he is? And if you walk into the party and you go, hey, what's up, all you other center of universes? Let's party. Then it gets much more fun and there's much less pain and suffering. Like, why would you discriminate against the center of the universe? Like, every human is the center of the universe. Every human is the same. Oh, here comes my cat. Sphinx.
Hi, kitty.
Yeah, Sphinx knew it was time to come in and do the feline representative here of the universe. Don't forget about the cats.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, that's the story in a nutshell, I guess.
What about these crafts that are hovering around the surface of the sun? Are they there to jump into one of these wormholes, or?
Yeah, you can look up on YouTube. There's a video somewhere in there, maybe, or maybe it's not up there anymore, of, these structures that look like comets that fly into the sun. There's a disc over the sun so that it doesn't expose the camera too brightly so you can see the corona. And then there's these objects that go into the sun, and somebody will say, look, those are comets. But look at how big those objects are compared to the size of the sun. Those are ships, planet-sized ships.
Yes.
And they're going into the sun.
Yes.
Because that's how you get to the other side of the galaxy, is you go into the sun, and then you have a wormhole that connects the sun with the center of the galaxy. It's near Sagittarius A, the center of the galaxy. We know where it is because you can see stars slingshot around this spot where there's nothing. So there's this giant gravitational field that's able to slingshot stars. And then from there, you can wormhole yourself to another star and then out of that star. So
thank you for that
very controversial thing to say in 2018.
Not at all. Not at all.
Well, not to you, but like, go tell that to all the fundamentalists of every religion on the planet, and they're not going to be happy.
We're planting seeds.
We're definitely planting seeds, and our job is to have empathy for anybody who's super confused, and especially the people that think my book says this and your book says that, so I'm going to kill you. And there's a bunch of those people right now on the surface of this planet. And it's not our job to say you're wrong, you guys are mean, and you're doing the wrong thing. It's to have empathy for them because they were told some very confusing things when they were a little kid and no one told them anything different. And they still think that their book is the only way I mean, there's only a small percentage of each religion that think like this. Obviously, these are extremists, fundamentalists of each religion. I mean, there's Buddhist monks that get violent, right? It's like there's no religion that's spared from this kind of confusion. But hopefully the number of people that are in that category are going down quickly. And, a lot of religious leaders are getting much more tolerant, and they're saying, oh, okay, well, this is one of the ways you can pray. Maybe we could let everybody pray how they want, kind of like we let everybody dance the way that they want and love the way that they want and play music the way they want. If we did that, we could transform the planet into Festival Earth overnight. Celebrating styles of faith like we celebrate styles of music. That's what I'd like to see. I've even made a Facebook page called Festival Earth because I'm so into this concept. So, and I have a festival. I'm a festival producer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm on site right now where we do this festival called Sonic Bloom, an electronic music festival here in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
Hummingbird Ranch, where it happens. So I'm very much into the festival culture, and I feel like festival culture is one of the best places to plant seeds, where there's a lot of cross-pollination between people and ideas and workshops. And a lot of forward thinkers go to festivals. I'm about to go to my 20th Burning Man in a row. That's where the guys who started Google started meeting and talking about Google. That's where Elon Musk will be there. I mean, it's an amazing thing that happens when you get forward thinkers all in the same place for days on end. The cross-pollination that comes out of that. It's not just party culture. It's also, consciousness culture.
Awakening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Are you aware of a planet I don't know if it's a planet or if it would be a ship behind the sun?
I think the seed of why people are saying that now goes back to Sitchin's translation of the Sumerian tablets.
Okay.
And unfortunately, this is the theory that I think makes a lot of sense, is that Sitchin mistranslated a single word.
Okay.
He said planet when he should have said comet.
Ah.
And so there's a comet that has a very long orbit that is circling our sun. And there's actually probably now a 9th planet that they're pretty sure exists that's a super giant, but it's, thousands of astronomical units away from the sun. An astronomical unit is the distance between the Earth and the sun.
Okay.
And all our gas giants are far, but we're talking about another planet way, way out there. It could be that planet that the Sumerians were talking about, or it could be a comet. But meanwhile, he said planet, and that eventually became known as what people call Nibiru, or the black sun.
Okay.
Which also could be confused with the possibility that our sun is part of a binary star system and the sun is orbiting another star on a very, very long scale, like billions and billions of years it takes to do one revolution. And so it's very hard for us to tell. But all these things, I think, are not obviously very clear in ancient texts. And if you mistranslate a single word, it can lead to this whole story being generated. And then you get people like David Icke coming along and saying that the reptilian aliens are evil and they've infiltrated our political system and they're on planet Nibiru hiding behind the sun and they're going to pop out and take us hostage and bring us to another planet to mine gold for them because they need gold in their atmosphere. And that's what the Anunnaki were doing when they were fighting in the sky thousands of years ago. I mean, it's all very hard to make sense of because you have all these different cultures talking in metaphors. There was no technology at that time that, like, you couldn't say, a spaceship. You might say, oh, there was an ark, like a boat that was flying in the sky. And then all of a sudden you have an eyeball with wings flying around like the Egyptians.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be that that's a little sun with wings and this thing moved by itself. And if you wanted to contain it and move it around, you have to make a container for it, which is why God told Moses to make the Ark of the Covenant. Okay. So all this stuff is all mixed up in all this mythology, and then it gets translated and retranslated and mistranslated, a game of telephone over thousands of years, which leads to you saying, I hear from people that there's another planet or a star hiding behind the sun.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work like that. The universe doesn't just have something hiding behind something. Everything has an orbit. There's a physics to this. We would be able to detect if there was another entity hiding behind the sun. We have a probe on the other side of the sun right now, taking a picture of the sun from the side we can't see. Like, it's not a mystery. There's no planet hiding back in there.
Okay.
But there definitely could be beings that we are not aware of because they have advanced technology that's hiding the fact that they exist. That's way more plausible to me than there's some gigantic, cosmological sized object that we can't detect hiding behind the sun. That I don't feel like.
Fair enough.
But who knows? No one really knows. If you're honest about any question, the answer is I don't know, but here's what I think is happening, and here's why. We're a giant torus. Same with the atoms, same with the Earth, same with the sun, same with the galaxy, same with the universe, same with the Planck spherical unit. It's all spinning vortex where information goes in and then it comes back out. It goes in and it comes back out. It's called feedback. It's called consciousness. It's the only thing that there is. We're fractally embedded inside that holographic universe. Holofractographic, as Nassim calls it. So it's a hologram, it's a fractal, and it's geometry. In other words, all the information of the entire universe is holographically encoded inside the proton, 10 to the 55th grams of vacuum fluctuations, which is the equivalent regular mass of the entire universe. Just like a symphony can be holographically encoded onto the surface of a CD. Mm-hmm. It's a very crude analogy, so you can kind of visualize like, oh, I see Beethoven's fifth is actually on here. I can't exactly see the bass player. The bass player is not actually on there, but the performance was holographically encoded. So in a very not exactly the same way, you can think of the entire universe being holographically encoded inside the proton. That's how the whole universe can keep track of itself at all scales, because all the information of the whole is embedded into every point.
Amazing.
Yeah, it starts to make sense when you realize how interconnected all the parts are.
Jamie, is there anything else that you can think of that you want to add regarding the sun? Anything of interest? Ancient civilizations or your...
I'd like to send a personal thank you out to the sun.
Okay.
For being so awesome and sparing us and not vaporizing our atmosphere off of the surface of the planet. There's a really cool YouTube channel that I just thought of, which is Suspicious Observers. Have you ever seen that guy?
Yep.
I really like his delivery, how dry and sarcastic he is. But the point is that he's giving you a daily update of what the sun is up to. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want a weather report of what's going on, you really just need the sun weather report. Because what the sun does affects the earth so much. He's always tying together the fact that the sun is affecting earthquakes and earth changes and weather patterns. It's fascinating. So I would recommend checking out his Suspicious Observers channel if you're interested in the sun. Because he mentions where all the websites are where you can go watch real-time monitoring of the sun and sunspots and the level of radiation and x-rays coming off the sun and all kinds of stuff. It's interesting.
Any UFOs going into the sun though at the same time?
He doesn't really talk. I've never heard him talk about that part, but that's where you got to check out Nassim Haramein and the Resonance Academy. There's a great online course that goes through all of Nassim's work, and it outlines kind of the worldview shift that you have to do where you start thinking about stuff differently and going through the history of physics that got us to the point where we are now, and kind of indicating where physics may have made mistakes in the past, correcting those, and creating a unified physics where all sciences are interconnected and unified into one cohesive whole. And then the implications and applications of that theory going forward on our technology and our consciousness, looking back at ancient civilizations. That's where I kind of specialize. I have a little course on Egypt in the Resonance Academy called Ancient Egypt Revisited, because we went to Egypt last October with the Resonance Academy, and we're going to Peru in November.
Oh, Machu Picchu?
Machu Picchu, Cusco, a bunch of places. Bolivia as well, Lake Titicaca. So we're going to check out more evidence of ancient technology where you see rocks that were cut with great precision and moved and aligned in great precision in ways that are not possible using traditional means like wheels and pulleys and vine ropes and slaves and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Totally. Slaves.
Yeah, and now we realize that there were never any slaves in Egypt at all.
Oh, is that true?
They just, yeah, they didn't do that. There were workers, there were people that were work, but they weren't like killing these folks. They found all the, places where farmers and workers were living around the base of the pyramid. It was likely that they were working on repairs. That the Egyptians found the Great Pyramid and said, this is awesome. Let's set up our city here and try to build another one of those things. And so they made the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid and the Pyramid at Saqqara, which are much more primitive pyramids. And they never actually got to build another one that was as good as the Great Pyramid, because that one was made by the ancient builders that came before the cataclysm that happened 12,400 years ago when a comet hit North America and flashed vaporized a bunch of the polar ice cap, raising sea levels by 400 feet in a very short amount of time and submerging most of this advanced civilization. And this occurrence is what got translated into this great flood myth that you hear about in about 300 different cultures worldwide. But again, that's Graham Hancock. Check out his book, Magicians of the Gods, and Chariots of the Gods, and all these books by Graham Hancock. Sign in the Seal, looking for the Lost Ark of the Covenant. Great work by Graham, uncovering this new, more resonant and more correct and more aligned with what we find on the ground theory about our ancient origins.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing those references.
Sure. Yeah.
Be very helpful for our viewers to catch up.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think I'm going to look into them myself as well. So, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
This information is outstanding.
Thanks. I feel like, I'm sticking my neck out a little bit on some of the things that I said. But like I said, who knows? Who knows? I just feel like there's a more resonant, more simple explanation than there's 11 dimensions curled up in every point in space, Kabayao space and string theory and all this. I think we've gone way down this random tangent and forgot about the core of the matter, which is space itself, space-time, and the geometry of space-time. It's the study of structure. Yeah, space memory. The structure of the study of structure in space is geometry. So I would encourage all your listeners, look into geometry deeply, and like Plato said, when you go deep into geometry, it inspires the spirit of philosophy, is what he said. There's a lot to be learned in geometry, and it's every language put together. Every kid on the planet can go into geometry and learn about that.
And there's a necklace that you normally wear. Can you tell our viewers about that necklace?
Yeah, 64 tetrahedron grid, and I don't have one. I don't think I have one quickly available, but if you start taking tetrahedrons and you push them together, if you have 8 of them pointing into a single point, you'll get a cube octahedron, what Buckminster Fuller called the vector equilibrium. It's a perfectly balanced 3D geometry. This is the theorized geometry of the fabric of the vacuum, except there's scalar octaves of that go to infinity. So when you start putting more tetrahedrons, when you get to 64 tetrahedrons, all packed together, you get 2 octaves of cube octahedron or 2 octaves of perfectly balanced geometry. It's the fewest number of tetrahedrons you need to start to see this infinite fractal division of the geometry of space that gets bigger and bigger and bigger and smaller and smaller. So 64 is important in that sense. And interestingly, there's 64 codons in your DNA. There's 64 hexagrams in the I Ching. And each one of those hexagrams is either 6 solid lines or 6 broken lines, which makes a star tetrahedron. 6 solid lines makes a tetrahedron, and 6 broken lines makes the opposite tetrahedron pointing the other direction, so it can pass through the original vectors. And that gives you the perfect balance of as above, so below, the Merkaba, the spin. And if you put a star tetrahedron inside of a sphere, it intersects at a specific latitude, 19.47, which is where you find increased sunspots on the sun. It's where you find the big red spot on Jupiter. It's where you find Teotihuacan in Mexico with a bunch of pyramids that are, again, showing you the relationship between a sphere and a tetrahedron. And if you put spheres around all the tetrahedrons of a 64 tetrahedron grid, you get a 3D flower of life symbol, which is, again, the geometry of the little tiny oscillations that make up the proton, that make up atoms, that make up molecules, that make up you. So it's the foundational geometric structure of the fabric of the vacuum of the universe. So it's the most foundational information there is, really, is geometric information. It's the original language.
I need to get myself one of those necklaces. Where can I find one?
I can get you one. I just haven't gotten my act together to put like an online store up online to do, getting those necklaces out, but I will be doing that this fall. So there's a bunch of people. I have them being 3D printed in, gold, silver, plastic, whatever material you choose.
Wow.
The little small one that you saw was handmade, actually, by handcrafters in Indonesia.
Beautiful.
Yeah, very difficult to make on that small scale. And I don't have any in stock right now, but I could get them.
Sure.
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, SoundCloud. I have a Pandora artist station. I play the hammer dulcimer, which is a percussion string instrument. And all my music is free on bandcamp.com. Just go to bandcamp.com and search Jamie Janover. I've got like 9 albums or so worth of music that you can download or stream for free.
Very nice. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you again, Jamie. And
thank you
to our viewers for tuning in. I appreciate your presence. And
thanks for sharing resonant information with the universe. You are part of the feedback loop that is bringing more coherency to our local region of the galaxy here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Much love.
See you next time.
Take care.